So I took all the pull rod and push rods, got them loosened. So the frame is sitting on this tube, which is the lowest most point of the frame. I have the front jacked up. So this tube is supposed to be parallel with the ground. So I just took the same angle of this slab of pavement and this tube are the same. Went ahead and got the battery out, which I'm glad I did, because there's this, those are on the battery but then just dangling around, and yeah, not good. But I have the motor sitting on some 3/8 strips of wood. It says I want the motor 3/8 inch up from the lowest point of the frame, so when the frame bottoms, that tube will hit, or should hit, before the motor does. And hopefully that saves some oiling down of the track. But now, so like the shifter is hitting with these old mounting tabs. The front mounting tabs seem to be okay, so I'll keep them there for now. Figure out how I mount the front motor mount here. Or I think this is one. No, it's not. That's it. And there's one further down, which I probably may or may not use. But a shifter, electric shifter mount is in the way. So I'm going to cut all of that out along with the radiator supports while I have a grinder out and make room for the motor. So what I just did, I wanted to show kind of the cautions, and maybe it's just a pet peeve of mine, but not a little bit, but also there's some reason behind it. So when going, like taking these welds down, I don't want to just take a grinder and just, you've seen some people take it all the way down with a grinder. But what that does, you're taking more material off than this to weld. You're taking some of the tube off. The material is spec'd out for a reason, for safety or, you know, strength. If like your A-arms, you know, you spec them out for strength and stiffness, or your roll cage is strength. You know, you don't want that thing blowing apart if you get into a wreck. Same with these. Trying to, like, they make a nice finish, smooth, but if you're not careful, you're hitting the actual tube, not the weld. And even here, I don't like that, the nicks. Because if this is like 0.35-2, I've seen some people do this and you're a third of the way through the tube already. So what I do is I take as much down as I can with the grinder. Then these Rolox, either these Scotch-Brite or the sanding ones, ting them down even more, almost to the tube, and then I like to use the file to finish it off, just because it's hand controlled and like a little bit more finesse, I feel. And then I just use this sandpaper to kind of see where I stand. Another thing to watch out is around the weld. You may think you haven't taken it all down, but it's really just some of the undercut from the weld itself. But just feel, and then when you're running across with the file, if you're hitting both sides, if you're hitting the weld and the tube and it's missing this little lines here, then that is just undercut. Because if it's bridging across, touching both, that just means that that's a low spot. Alright, so now all those mounts are cut out. The shifter mount is gone, so got lots of room for activities now. Well, maybe not lots, but more than we did. So I'll get this situated like we found in the video about the CG. The bottom of this can be anywhere flat, and then it can tilt forward, kind of how it is now. So I'll get in here and play around and kind of see what fits, what I like. The sprocket with a chain, no lower. I guess this is already cut out for the chain, but I don't want the chain to interfere with that. And then the exhaust, but I want to make sure they come out and then have room to clear the firewall here, so I don't burn my back like I did with our 2012 car. So got the motor where I want it. I didn't quite get it as far over as I wanted, but as long as I don't keep the diff too low, I think the chain can clear. If not, I can just make another cutout for the chain. So I ended up going with a basically as vertical, the most vertical the engine can go with, keeping the CG low. And then got some room between the firewall and the motor. So here's the original motor mount that was for the Suzuki. So it's solid, but these were like, I forget, some kind of rubber. You see just how nasty and corroded they are now, and they're super soft, like my fingernails disintegrating them. So I can use this mount here. I think it'll almost be good there. And then I can just move this mount over and then cut this other side and shorten it. Got my quench bucket with coffee grounds. You can see that rubber bushing or whatever, urethane, whatever material was, is a little bit of heat, and just how brittle it is, it's just collapsing. Can't even see the hole through it anymore. So I got the notch for this alright. It's not finalized, but close enough to test fit. So now I'm going to see if the angle is right on it. So it looks like the back part here needs a little more grinding, so I can get the bung or whatever this part's going to be called parallel to that tube. Alright, so we got the angle right now, and then also the fit around the tube is pretty nice. No gaps, no big gaps. So that's ready to weld. I'm just going to clean this stuff out because that's going to be nasty putting a weld on it. So I got both pieces cleaned up, paint removed. The inside of this has all that whatever urethane rubber stuff removed. So now it's ready to weld. Welded. Haven't welded in a long time. Should weld more, that's fun. Alright, next I'm gonna cut this one off. It's gonna be a little tricky because of how it's welded onto this mount bung tube thing, but it shouldn't be terribly hard, but it'll be a little more tricky. So get to it. So I got the one mount off. I don't know if you can see it, but this is never actually welded underneath. It was just welded around this perimeter. You can see it's pretty nasty in there. Once I get all this ground off, then I can go back in and re-weld that so the full perimeter is welded. And I'll clean this off as well, get it ready for to move over to then wherever it's going, here-ish. So I got this part cleaned up. It's not completely smooth, but for what this is, where it's going to be, it's pretty good, and I really doubt you'll be able to see those little hairlines once it's painted. But here, you can see where it's never welded. So I'll have to clean this up, go over that weld, and then I'll go back over this one to add a little filler just to add some reinforcement there since I ground that weld off. But the rest of it's still there. So start doing that. So I got this cleaned up, took a wire brush and also a file to get some of that flashing away. Still going to take a file. I'm going to clean this up because I want it cleaned up. But the part that I cut off here, I had that leftover piece, I took and coked both ends, so that's going to be for the other side. I'm going to put it on the car, bolt it together to get the spacing right, and then tack it in the car and then bring it back to the bench to finish weld. But before I do that, I'm going to clean up this paint so it'll be ready to go when once it's all positioned. The issue right now is this curved part is under that mount, so I made the this part to be straight, so I gotta grind a little more to take into account that curve. What I'm gonna do is just mark right under the mount so I can take the whole thing to the workbench and grind it and know how it should fit or where it should fit. So looking at it, it's perpendicular to the tube, so I'll go try this back on the car. Should fit. I got it tacked. Should be a fun weld. Just gonna hit it with a wire brush real quick and burn it in. Welded. Now I'm gonna let it cool down and try it on the car. I got the bolt through on the motor, so the part didn't shrink or warp or do anything weird. It still fits in there nice and snug around the swing arm mount. So next, it's gonna be a little delay because I don't have any sheet metal to make the mounts to put the tabs on the frame to hold that. And I also need to get some kind of bushing in there before putting those tabs on. So I have these little spacers I made on my little CNC. They'll just slide into the mounts to space the between the mount itself and the bolts. And these are just temporary. They're made out of wood until I wanted to make sure this thing was cutting accurate, so I did a couple test blocks, but these will be made out of metal. These will go into the swing arm mount on the motor itself, and then these ones will be out of polyurethane or whatever rubber I can get, just to absorb some of the vibration and also take some of the shock load. I have seen some of the FSAE cars, the motor mounts break. So this one never did, and it originally had rubber on it. So my CNC it'll cut, doing the same test cuts, these two blocks, around 5 thousandths, so not super accurate for like a press fit, but for rubber that's pretty deformable to start with. It'll be fine. But these I want to make out of metal. So I'll either have to see if there's something already out there where maybe the outside diameter is right and I just gotta ream it, or just send out for a one-off job, someone with a lathe, or buy a mini lathe ideally, but we'll see. So I have it here. It fits over the bolt well, so it bored it pretty nice. We'll see how it fits in the motor. I unbolted this piece of exhaust. It's what went into the inlet of the turbo. But it's pretty much the only bend I have to kind of work off of. And it's bigger diameter tubing, I think, or maybe about the right size for the header coming out of the motor. But even with this flange, I can't get it all the way in. But I can set it up here. And it's not quite a 90, but I mean that flange is messing with it. I think I'll have plenty of room here to actually get the header out from the motor. And if this could go in more, it wouldn't be touching this tube, so I think I'll be good here as far as motor position and exhaust, to be able to get in there and not have the exhaust come through the firewall here. So I'm going to call that final position for the motor. So I got the wood bushings pressed in and drilled out to 5/16, which is the bolt size I'm going to go with for those. And so I'm going to mock it all up on the engine and the frame, and I'm using just some cardboard to make templates for the tabs. So I got the tabs in place, motor mount, bolts through it. So I got a weld over there and on that tab. That's enough that it's going to hold it in place. To finish weld it, I really want to take the motor out and move the frame up or on its side so I can get to it easier, but I don't want to take the motor out right now while it's all in place where I want it. I'm going to go ahead at this point because, I mean, this is enough that it shouldn't move, but while it's here I want to go ahead and do the front motor mount. So I have the original motor mount for the LTR in, so I can get one side in. The other side won't fit because the motor, the mount's hitting the block. This side has a huge gap. But here's the mount for the 400EX. So these won't reach. And what I think I'm gonna do, because this bolt-in tube is so close to this one already, I'm gonna just not even use this and weld something similar to this, but from here, and just weld it straight to this one. The idea behind this bar was you can unbolt the bolts on, left, right, and these ones as well, and the motor would drop out the bottom. I think if I weld a mount straight to this tube that's part of the roll hoop, I could unbolt this, the motor will drop out the bottom and kind of swing off of it'll swing off of this pivot, kind of drop down, and if I have to, I'll probably have to rotate the motor back, but I think it'll still go out the bottom because there's plenty of room for it to drop down. The case is kind of in the way, but if I tilt the front of the motor up, then I could be able to shimmy it past the mounts, the hard mounts that are welded, and it'll still drop out the bottom. So I'm just get rid of some complexity and then cut this tube up. I don't have any 1-inch tube. I have some 3/4 and some 1.25 inch, but no 1-inch. So this will have to be my sacrificial piece. And this has solid mounts. I'm gonna use kind of like this does with some rubber bushings. It's gonna be solid mounted here because it's welded. So I'll have a bushing here. Well, this one I'm gonna go straight because the gas tank goes over this tab here. The gas tank comes almost over, or it does come right to this tab. So I'll probably do this tube straight and this one at a bit of an angle just to give it a little bit more strength laterally. So measuring from the center of the tube I want to mount to the center of the hole on the motor mount, it's about 7.25 inches. So I'll just measure out 7.5. Close enough for what I'm doing. I'm going to use this angle that's already in the tube. So I'm eyeballing the center of the mount on this end. And then I know I started my measurement at the end of the table. So I'll just scribe a line. And this is just rough to get something started. So that's why I'm not being exact here, but I need to know where in here to cut. So there's a 7.5 line. So cut that and start cutting this tube off. And then most of the work will be done already. Alright, so I got the tube cut the old standoff off, cleaned it up, got the paint off just so it's ready when I am ready to weld. There's no paint. Gonna prep now while I'm cleaning all this up. So now I'm gonna fit it up to the motor and then start notching the tube for the frame. Chop the end. Now I got something to closer. Set it on the tube. Not a whole lot. So should be good size to start notching. Something I've been thinking of is, I don't remember how thick this tube is. That I know that one's 095 wall. Sounds pretty thin. This, that's 065. So I'm gonna drill it, just an 1/8 inch hole, just to see if I can kind of figure out how thick it is. That went through pretty easily. Yeah, that's 035 wall. So I'm going to go think about if I want to continue this way or not. This is FEA of the 095 wall thickness tube, and the stresses are below the yield. The parts that are red, wherever there's a sharp point in FEA, I've always found it to be high, and I'm not expecting it to be that high in the actual tube. And here's the stresses of the 035 wall tube, which is in the car. And it's just going to yield, it's going to break, so I'm going to have to take it out. It's reading 45,000, so take the burr away, it's 035 wall. So yeah, wasn't going to work for the motor mount. So I got the old tube cut out, and I grinded the, so I cut it about here, then I cut out the rest of it, and I left the inside here, because these tubes were notched around it, and then I'll put the new tube against it, and then, well, kind of see the idea. It'll lay in there, and then I'll notch around here to make a good fit, and then weld it all in. But here I just rolled up a piece of cardboard, and I can take a pencil and trace around it. So now I have it all traced out, and I have my line of where to cut, and just wrap it around. And then mark on the tube. And it's not going to be perfect because I had this inside the tube on the frame, so the diameter that I marked it on isn't this 1 inch diameter, but it'll be pretty close. So I mean, that's a starting point, and then it'll just be a little small tuning to get it to fit with no gap, but this should save a lot of time. So we got the tube scribed, and now I just got to grind right up to the line. So I got this side pretty close. There's a little bit of a gap. So this side, the tube's still long, but it'll give me room to trim because this one isn't fitting as well. So the trick to these is you don't want to grind where the gap is. Grind what's touching. So this tip here is what's touching, so I need to take that back, or yeah, grind it back, and then it'll be able to fit in there, and hopefully that gap will close up. I got the tube in, Fits all right. The bottom has a bit of a gap, but nothing that can't be welded. So it's got to clean all this old dinosaur dirt mix, and strip the paint, and then weld it up. Then I can do the front mounts down to this bar, which is the whole reason I did this to start with. So I got the front mounts made and they are welded in. Not fully welded, but the front half that I can get to. So that's enough to support the engine. I can get it off these wood spacers and get the car actually on the suspension again to roll around better. And then once I make everything else, the exhaust and wiring, I'm gonna take everything out, move the frame around, and I can actually finish weld all these tubes. The only one that's fully welded is I did that one on the bench because I could actually take it out and do it. But got those wood spacers on fire, that was fun. But I'm happy that it's mounted enough to call it Instagram good. And I got the car, the push rods and pull rods are on, so it's back on its suspension, and the motor's still in there, hasn't fallen to the floor yet, but it's mounted. Other than eventually fixing this or getting a new valve cover, whichever, and then making a couple tabs, but that can wait. This is where the engine's gonna live, so I can work on wiring, diff mount, exhaust intake, everything else. So this one step enables a lot of other things to happen.